Hi, I'm astrologer Penny Dix, as you know very well, and welcome to another of my In Conversations with. And today I am very blessed to have this lovely lady from Oz, from Australia, and who is enjoying late summer now. Her name is Mary Flo Free. Her name, I think, is wonderful. And I'm going to ask you about that, Mary. And also, Mary has done a lot of work and research into more the metaphysics behind astrology. And so we're going to have a conversation about the co-creation of astrology. So with no further ado, I want to introduce you to Mary Flo Free. Hi, Mary, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me to have this conversation, Penny. It's a
Tell me
pleasure.
about your name first, because I find it, I've said this name to a few people and they just gone, wow, what an extraordinary name.
Well, my mother, she didn't have very many intuitive insights that she shared with me, but she said she heard a message. She was from a very religious background. She came from the Brethren, the Plymouth Brethren religion
Oh,
that she
wow.
grew up with. But she said to me, when I first fell pregnant with you, I received a message and it said, "You're carrying a girl and her name has to be Mary." And so instead of me getting the female name of Florence, abbreviated to Flo, as my
Is that a sort of a family name,
well,
Florence?
my mother was Flo, my grandmother was Flo, um, so etc. So down the female line. So instead of getting Flo as my Christian name, it became my middle name, and my father's surname is Free. So that's my actual name.
It's beautiful.
And
It's almost like the cosmos has blessed you with this wonderful name.
and why it's also gives you something that you have to try and work with.
This is true.
And,
This is
and
true.
I've understood from the Essene community teachings that, and from Sir Lawrence Gardner's book, The Magdalen Legacy, which was quite fascinating. He was a brilliant scholar. Um, he's said that the Marys and the Marthas in the Essene community were not actual names, they were collectives, and that the Marys were the healers and the midwives and the herbalists, and the Marthas were the ones that took care of the day-to-day running and the account keepers and the ones that kept the community going. So I see Mary more as a collective name,
Right.
um, and it's appropriate at the time that we're in because Mary is symbolic of the divine feminine, which
Yes.
I feel is going to be coming much more back into balance
Yes.
and harmony than where it has been in the past.
Mm. So we're going to talk about or look at the what we feel is how you co-create with astrology. And one of the things or the places that I think we could start at is that your sun, your natal sun in Aries, is at the 0 degree point, which I find and found fascinating when we first met. But also, your Aries ascendant is at the 0 degree of Aquarius. Well, it's actually at 1 degree, but it's
No,
basically
Aries,
it's
not
basically
Aquarius.
your sorry, Aries, yes. So you've got your sun at 0 degrees of Aries, and you've got your ascendant at 0 degree of Aries. Now, you know,
And Mercury at 2 degrees.
that's right, and you've got Mercury at 2 degrees of Aries. Now, and so Saturn is actually now conjunct your Mercury, which I think is interesting that this chat we're having is not only when Saturn is conjunct your Mercury, but it's also the day that we're recording this. We are about an hour away from the full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo, which for you falls in your sixth house. So I think it's all very highly symbolic that you could say through this conversation, the Virgo moon is pulling you out of the shadows for you to shine some of your light into the world. How does that sit with you?
Um, I think you're probably. I'm feeling a call. My life's just been turned upside down in the last 12 months. It's been I can't recognize where I am now to where I was 12 months ago, which is interesting. Um, my husband died very suddenly.
Oh, I'm so
My beautiful dog, my border collie, left with him. I couldn't look after the property that we had that was totally off grid. So I've moved very swiftly through all of those things, and I now find myself, instead of being on a property in the middle of the bush, totally off grid, to a sweet little townhouse right smack bang in the middle of a town.
Wow. And would you say, because certainly as an astrologer, I feel that this is an incredible expression of the Saturn Neptune sitting on that Aries sun and Aries ascendant. Is and what I yes, because I think it's interesting because you were saying really it's over the last year. And I think this is quite an important point to get across to people that when these outer planets make these very powerful conjunctions, we feel the impact of them many, many months before the exact hit from that
Yeah,
conjunction. And that is actually, from what you're saying, that fits in very much with what you've been saying.
I think so. And one of the things that I feel Saturn is asking not only of myself, but I'm experiencing that in my life, but also of all of us, is to take responsibility to discipline our spiritual practice. And my main thing that I did want to get across tonight was the word, how we have to look at what we create with our words.
Mm.
Um, there was an Aramaic saying, and because everything's actually there if we take the time to research it. And the Aramaic saying is abracadabra, which, of course, in modern times we've bastardized to mean magic, abracadabra.
Mm.
And it is actually magic, but that magic is what abracadabra actually means. Abracadabra means, as I speak, so I create. And we in modern times, I feel, don't take everything that we say. We don't think before we speak. We are very quick to say words that um, we don't take it as that is our creative power. The
Yes.
Bible,
So
the
it's
Bible,
not taking responsibility, isn't it?
it
Giving
is.
thought to the words that we use. How do you see words then? This is interesting. How do you see words fitting in with the co-creation of astrology and how astrology um, has unfolded over the years?
Well, to me, astrology, I've always seen astrology as a form of a science. It's not,
Yes.
my husband used to have a word that was hooby-jooby. It's it's definitely not hooby-jooby. To me, the science of astrology is based on frequency, so an electrical science, and it is incredible to look at when you look at from a true astrology perspective, not something you'd see in a women's magazine or something like that, but when you look from the real scientist, which of course you are, Penny, you are doing the research, you're doing the science, and you read the frequency
Yeah.
of each of the planets, and that gives us an overview, a blueprint of what we are being asked as incarnate souls to bring forth in our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So when I look at how the planets that are now lined up, these things are incredible, like Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. I listened to Rick Levine, the beautiful
Mm,
astrologer, the other night, and he said they haven't aligned up at 0 degrees Aries since 4,361 BC.
mm,
If you take that, so that's 6,000 plus years ago that we have been given this opportunity where we are right now. And to me, 0 degrees Aries is a point that asks for embodied spirituality. It asks for truth. Truth has always been paramount in my life. I find lying really difficult. I find, if someone once said to me, if you could have a wish, one wish for the world, what would it be? And I said, oh, that's easy, that we could not lie. And they said, that'd be difficult. And I said, it might be inconvenient sometimes not to be able to lie. You know, if someone says, does this look nice on me? And you can't lie, even a little white lie. But imagine where we would be as a humanity and how much clearer and how much clarity that we'd know where we stand. So that would be my wish
Do,
still.
yeah. Do you think then that the Saturn Neptune um, conjunction and subsequent move through Aries is something about bringing that opportunity into us?
I totally believe. I I've heard some astrologers say, well, Saturn and Neptune, they are conjunct every 36 years
Yes.
and they bring about the destruction of a regime, which
Mm.
looks like we might be seeing at the
Another one.
moment. Yes. And the Berlin Wall and all the other revolutions. But I'll draw back on something that really struck me as very true a long time ago. So 35, 30 plus years ago, I was practicing biodynamic farming.
Ah,
And
right.
and we bought this piece of land and it had been used for conventional farming before we bought it. So I rang the Biodynamic Association in Australia and was very fortunate to speak to Alex Podolinsky, who has since passed, a great man of wisdom, who's well known in biodynamic circles all over the world for his lectures and his wisdom. And what he explained to me when I said I was worried about that there might still be residues of chemicals on the land, I had a brilliant mentor farmer that was a biodynamic mentor. You get a mentor when you do biodynamic farming, and in turn, you later are meant to go on and be a mentor. And I said to him, but it worries me that there might be chemical residues. Do I need to get all these tests done on the land? And he said, when you look at the 500 preparation, one of the main biodynamic preparations, and you look at the land, they make up two parts of the whole. And I see Saturn and Neptune. Let's say the soil and the 500 are Saturn and Neptune. But he said, what is the most important thing is the intent of the farmer. What the farmer intends changes everything. In a laboratory, they had done tests with 500 and soil, and it hadn't had the amazing effects that it does when it's on a farm. And the farmer wants the best for that land. He wants the intent of the farmer is what makes the 500 and the soil into this productive, amazing land.
Can
So
I,
I
can I
see
just can I just ask you, what is the 500?
500 is one of the formulas that they bury the poo in the cow horns, has to be a cow, and they're buried underground in the autumn. And when the spring comes, it is brought out, and the microbes have had an incubation period, and they're minute. And through a process of stirring and creating chaos and stirring back again, you create a life force and you spread that over the land. And those bacteria go onto the soil and multiply and bring the life force back to the soil.
Oh, wow.
Amazing results.
Wow.
So, in that, I see, from my perspective, I see Saturn and Neptune as the soil and the 500 preparation, but with what determines how they work, because they work, that is the intent of the farmer. And I see in this instance the degree of where they fall is the intent, and
Right.
the degree of the 0 degrees, the creation point, the 0 degrees of Aries, and a
I,
new beginning.
I'm really fascinated because I've got your chart here, as you know, and I was looking like what's going on in Taurus, because Taurus is the earth and everything about growth and growing. And you've got Ceres here. Well, Ceres is Demeter, who's the
Yes,
earth mother, who is the mother of Persephone. She is the goddess of earth and growth and crops and wheat and corn. And not only that, you've got your South Node in Taurus. This is what you are bringing in. And I'm thinking, and also because, of course, you've got an Aries ascendant, it means Taurus is your second house. So everything about production and giving back to the planet, if you like, and the world. And it's as if you've always been a farmer. You bring that in from generations, but it's not just farming earth. There's something more subtle here, isn't there? And I think you'll pick up where I'm going.
quite possibly. Well, I've had guidance, I've had connection to my soul, um, I want to call it higher self, soul. I've had connection ever since I was tiny. My soul spoke out in adult sentences when I was 9 months of age, shocking people because the baby couldn't speak, but this voice would come out. She used to embarrass me a bit when I got a bit older because she'd say, has a sense of humor. So I've always had a connection of an otherworldly connection through the connection I have with my soul. Once, who described it very well for me once was Joe Dispenza. And I said, oh, I've come to learn with you, Joe. And he said, my goodness, what do you want? What can I teach you? And I said, well, I want to know how to control this. And he said, Mary, he said, you have an open dimensional gateway. And he said, it's not up to the little you to control it. He said, what it is, have you ever looked at your name? Mary Flo Free. He said, it's not for you to control. It's for the universal, your soul's timing, and you just go along with it. And I
That
said,
is,
oh,
oh, that is beautiful. That is beautiful.
saying that to an impatient Aries many years ago, and I'm like, oh no, I want to control it. But I've learned since that I just allow.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. I'm still thinking about the symbolism of the Saturn Neptune happening 4,000 6,000 roughly years ago, right? And I'm thinking about the origins of astrology. And I'm wondering if there is something in this Saturn Neptune conjunction in the 0 degree of Aries, which is also about the origins of astrology and the reintroduction of the ability to understand it at a scientific level, as you've already suggested, and to that for all of us, we will perhaps be able to somehow learn about how to tune into the frequencies of the planets, of these energies, so that we can actually have some coordination of our lives and our life paths, and how that unfolds going forwards in the future. I don't know what you feel about that.
Well, I think because we acknowledge that the moon, just take one of the planets, the moon affects the tides. There are some rivers in the world that at full moon, they actually flow backwards. Instead of out
Really?
to sea, they flow backwards. It's in
Wow.
South America, I think. It's amazing.
Oh,
So the moon affects so many things, and we've come to accept that. So that's where the lunatic, the full moon expands whatever's going on. So if we're in a positive frame, it expands it. If we're in a negative frame, it causes problems. When you find people in nursing homes and other places, they always know when it's full moon, whether they look outside or not, because of the behaviors
mm,
of what people are experiencing. So we accept the moon. And it's interesting, many years ago, I'm not sure whether it was BMW or Mercedes, they were having problems with the ball bearings for the motors. And they could not get these ball bearings. They couldn't find a rhyme or reason, but every so often when they were produced, the ball bearings would disintegrate in the motors. And they could find the day that particular ball bearing was made, but they couldn't see a pattern. And one of the executives says, I've got an old aunt in England, and I'd like to show her the dates and see what she can come up with. They'd thought, workers coming back after the
yeah,
weekend,
yeah.
workers looking forward to knocking off. So anyway, he showed her and she said, oh, that's easy. Those are node days on the calendar, on the moon calendar. So it was so now that factory, I don't know, it was either BMW or Mercedes. They follow a moon calendar when they're making perfectly round spheres,
Wow.
because on node days, which are red, not good energy days, they
Yes.
are not totally round and disintegrate in an engine. They
Wow.
don't make them on a node day. So when you
Fascinating.
think that we take so many things like that for granted for the moon,
Mm.
and why not for all of the planets?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
they are. This is just an evolution of where we're going.
Yeah.
Um, and there's more and more people follow astrology. It's spoken about more often. It's
Mm.
an evolution of understanding the gift that
Mm.
we are being guided,
Yeah.
because we do have a free choice,
Mm.
but we are being guided. It's the roadmap to what our soul is communicating with us. But as a collective, this has been these planets and wars breaking out when Mars and
Uranus were in square on Friday.
and Uranus, etc. So when you look at that, but that's been set in motion since before we were on the planet, before those stars don't meet up magically now.
Mm.
They've always been going to be here.
Mm.
So that to me gives me a reassurance in my life that we are following a path that has been created by source. It
Yes.
has
Yes.
laid down.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so I find that reassuring.
yeah, and
And the more
you sent me this lovely quote in your email, which was a Lao Tzu quote, which is, "If you want to awaken all of humanity, then awaken all of yourself."
and that's totally true.
Mm.
That's 100% how it
I
works.
think that by tuning into the resonance and the frequency of the planets, especially understanding the blueprint of one's own natal chart, that actually gives you the ability to awaken all of yourself, because this is what the planets are saying. Hello, we're here. Like for you, Saturn, Neptune, 0 degrees. It's like, whoa. Um, you are waking up. You've been waking up for years. You were awake before you were born, I think. had a look briefly at Florence Scovel Shinn because she is someone I've followed for years. And
Yes.
she was a metaphysician in the, well, early
19,
20th century. She was
1920s her book
90, yeah.
came out.
And her book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, was written in 1926. And she also, as I know you know, wrote a book called Your Word is Your Wand. And
Yes.
I don't want to lose the thread that we had about the power of words because I think it's quite important. It's quite important.
It is because that is even the Bible, if you go into John, says in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. So it's telling us that the word is our creative power. And then we hark back to Avra Kedavra, the
Mm.
old Aramaic saying, as I speak, so I create. That is the magic, and that is our power to create. But we haven't, Florence Scovel-Shinn, she followed that. Actually, from my understanding, Louise Hay was a great fan of her, and
Right.
that's where she based her subsequent work on.
Yes.
So our words are what we create with.
Mm.
And my understanding is that the subconscious mind hears everything literally. So if someone says, "Oh, they give me the shits," excuse my language, "They give me the shits," we're actually saying, or "They make me sick." We're actually creating that. We're using that to create that in our reality.
Mm. Mm.
So if we look at the world, and my understanding also is if we don't consciously use our creative power, our energy goes to the default setting.
Yeah.
So if we just say, sit on the fence about things and don't use consciousness, we are supporting the status quo that
Yes.
we've had on this planet.
Mm.
So it's really time, and that's what I believe the Saturn Neptune at 0 degrees Aries
Mm.
is a whole new beginning and giving us an opportunity to actually create the reality that we as humanity wish to see. And we have the power of that.
Yeah.
Every person has the power of that.
Yeah. And I think there's something there with what you're saying, which reminds me um, to sort of perhaps underline that it's not just personally in our own lives how the Saturn Neptune may affect certain areas of our lives, but it's for us also as part of that collective consciousness that we are all part of an evolving humanity, although one has to say, if you look at the news, are we evolving? Is debatable, but you know
Well,
what I mean. But I also want to just come back also to the power of words, because when I first moved to Gozo, I was a full-time carer for my mother, whom I brought with me. She'd had a stroke, and so I was her carer, and it was very hard work. She was in a wheelchair, and it was just hard work. And I can remember I was getting really exhausted by it. And I kept saying to myself, oh, God, give me a break. God, I need a break. Give me a break. Well, the universe did. It said, okay. And it helped me to fall over outside my house and break my leg. And that was
and
on a Saturn transit, I hasten to add.
that is us creating.
Yes. So I'm
And so
now
we
so careful what I say. And I think this is what you're suggesting that we need to express to everyone, that the more aware we are of the words we use and how they do create our reality, especially if we are doing it unconsciously, give me a break. That is the universe will give you exactly what you ask for.
It will. I think it was in Greg Braden's book, The God Code, which is still one of my favorite
Well,
of
I
all
don't know
time.
that. I don't know that book. It's
Probably had its
what's it about?
20th year. anniversary,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a brilliant book. Covers a whole lot of things. It's very relevant still, in my understanding. But in that book, he said that to change all of humanity, coming back to, he said, we only need, because positive energy affects change more. So than negative energy, it has a higher influence. David, was it David? Oh, I know his name. David Hawking in Power versus Force. He
Mm-hmm.
showed um, the frequencies that we bring in, the higher frequencies of joy, of love, of courage. Um, they hold a higher frequency than the negative emotions. So when we start to bring in the higher frequencies, we affect the collective to a bigger degree. So we affect more people. We offset more of the negativity. Very interesting charts to see. And so Greg Braden said from memory that what we need to flip over humanity is the square root of 1% of the population.
Mm.
And I think at the time he wrote that, the square root of 1% of the population was only something like 8 or 10,000 people that believe it was. And yes, the book it's had its 10th anniversary. I'm not sure if it's up to its 20th, but it's a brilliant book, still totally in print. And that brings me, you've heard of the 100th monkey?
Yes, yes.
So when you look at that as a real life example of the collective consciousness,
Yeah.
so in a nutshell, the monkeys in Japan had some disease develop in, I think it was the rhesus monkeys. So to stop, it was like a chlamydia or something like that. So they separated colonies and put them on different islands to stop the whole species being wiped out, because Japan's got many little outlying islands. And in one of the compounds, they used to throw them yams, sweet
Oh,
potatoes.
yes, yes.
And they threw the yams in this day, but there was a moat around them. And they all scurried for the food. But one of the sweet potatoes fell in the water, and the one monkey went over. And instead of it falling on the sand and being covered in grit, his came out of the water, or hers, and he ate it, or she ate it, and said, "Oh my goodness, like this is amazing." So
Better.
the
No
next
grit.
day, yeah, so the next day, that monkey went and washed his potatoes, and other monkeys started watching, and in that colony, and more and more of the monkeys went, "This is a great thing. It's so much nicer to eat this food." So they all started in one separate colony. They started washing their sweet potatoes before they ate them, after
Right.
washing the
Yeah.
grit off.
Mm.
They reached, which we call the 100th monkey, but they reached the point, like Greg Braden says, the square root of 1% of humanity. They reached a point where enough monkeys in that colony were doing that it flipped their collective consciousness over. And the very next day, every colony of all the monkeys, totally separate, were
Would do it.
conjoined by the collective consciousness
Yeah.
of their groups,
Yeah.
started washing their
I know.
sweet potatoes.
It's an
We
extraordinary
can do
theory.
that.
Yeah, it's an
We
extraordinary
can do that.
theory. We can do it. And you probably know some of the work of Rupert Sheldrake, who talked about morphic resonance. And
Yes.
I actually met him many years ago because his wife, Jill, God, forgotten her name. Anyway, she taught me some of my first astrology.
Oh, how
Jill Purse,
wonderful.
that's her name, Jill Purse, and she does a lot of work with the healing potential of sound and the sort of overtone chanting. She does a lot of that,
Well,
And
of course, our word is sound, our voice is sound.
exactly. And that brings us back to Florence, of course, Florence Scovel Shinn, and what she was saying about, we have to be so careful what we say. So you could also say that if one thinks, oh gosh, Uranus is conjunct my sun, which I've just had, I'm giving it the sound that, oh, this is something to be feared, as many people will do with these outer planets. They see it as something bad or terrifying, which, often a lot of people feel that with Saturn. But actually, I just looked at it and thought, wow, this is a wonderful opportunity for change and growth. And I think that if we could shift people away from their projection of fear onto, say, the cosmic bodies, and actually into co creating with them and saying, wow, I've got a Saturn transit. How cool is this? My goodness, I'm going to come out of this so much stronger and wiser. Then you would be working in harmony with your chart.
Exactly. And I feel that that's a really, really important point you've just brought up. Each of the planets has something very important to teach us, and they're learnings. We're here to learn. Our learnings are so important, and they give us opportunity to look deeper, understand deeper, to grow, to understand ourselves.
Yes.
Like uh, the last year for me has been, on a physical level, has been quite difficult,
Mm-hmm.
but the understanding of myself, where I'm at now, I actually cherish the learnings that I've had.
Mm. Mm.
So
And I think, I've
I'm
just come
still
back to
learning.
you. Yeah.
We never finish, by the way.
Oh, we don't. No, no. I've just come back to your chart because I think when we booked it, it hadn't actually occurred to me that it was the day of the full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo. And I think in regards to your own chart, it is really quite interesting because um, I think that there's something about the Saturn Neptune for me in your chart, which is talking about you coming into the light, because it's no more you just keeping this to yourself and staying the sort of quiet hermit in the background. But the moon is the eclipse is saying, let's bring you out of the shadows. Let's bring you into the full light of the sun. And, the first degree of Aries, this enormous kind of platform of here you go. This is like, for me, it's like a launch pad for you and your teachings and your ideas. And, I just want to encourage you to explore this even more. And I think you've got to start getting this out there to the public.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your belief, and how intuitive of you to pick today. What an auspicious day.
I had no idea. I really had no idea. But look, what else do you have a list there of things you wanted to talk about?
I definitely do. I feel that collectively we need to start to step into our own authority
Yeah.
and become responsible,
Hmm.
and stop handing for how long have we handed all of our responsibilities over to ideologies, to institutions, to governments? And I'm not speaking rebellion, but we actually need to stand in our own truth, and we can feel that if we stop before we speak, and we can feel the truth for us, and we need to have the courage to stand and say, well, no, this isn't correct, this doesn't work for me, I don't resonate with that. We need to, instead of always going, to be quiet and to go along with what everybody else wants, and to stand your truth. How many people, if we go back to the COVID era, how many people just went along and didn't listen to what their guidance was telling them, and went along with the
Mm.
with handing over their bodily autonomy.
I think the problem
And
is that people get lazy, and
absolutely,
there's a sort of an inability to take responsibility to a certain extent. I'm not saying that as a generalization, but a lot of people just want to be told what to do. And I think that we've reached this tipping point where we've got to decide what to do. We've got to tell ourselves what is right, what is wrong.
that comes back to, isn't that what earlier, the shifts of from Capricorn to Aquarius,
Yeah.
aren't they about the people finding, coming out of being sitting on the fence? Or
Yes.
they'll look after it. We can blame the government for this, we can blame the church for that, we can blame, but coming back and taking responsibility for
Yeah.
our own actions.
Yeah.
So I think that's a general theme. Once again, astrology lays it down for us, doesn't it?
Yes. And I think the current astrology is inviting us, is asking us, imploring us to stand in our sovereignty, to recognize that we are complete individual human beings with the most amazing antennae and ability to connect with these other frequencies, so that if we can work in harmony with the collective, um, we can move mountains.
We
And
can.
and I'm thinking that there's something here about the power of intent, the power of collective intent and prayer, whatever name you want to assign to it. But, where like Pam Gregory has these daily times where she invites people to get together and just for 15 minutes send out positive intent to the planet. And I think that works. I don't know
It
how,
does work.
it must do.
It totally
Yeah,
It totally works. It
yeah,
100% works,
yeah.
because we're so there's, if for instance, if we worry about people, we're actually putting a negative energy on that person.
Mm.
But if we send out positive intent and what we wish to create, and you look at what's a good example of that? There's a story that I know you tell some stories.
Oh, come on.
Maybe.
Tell us a story, Mary. Tell us a
No.
story.
Well, there's a story, and I that was told to me, and I believe it to be a true occurrence. There was a Swiss man who is a master watchmaker, and that Swiss man would have very precision work to fix these watches. And sometimes, while he was working, his hand would begin to tremble and shake. And instead of wondering what he was doing, and he couldn't do his work, he would go to the telephone and he would dial his mother, and he'd say, "Mum, stop worrying about me. I can't work."
Oh, wow.
So I believed when I heard that story that it was a true story. And I think so. My youngest son has done quite a bit of travel, and I would all of a sudden feel him while he was traveling. And instead of worrying, I would visualize him in his highest and best potential. Sometimes, yes, they need to have slight altercations for a higher learning opportunity, but I would see him in his highest and best. And I've done quite a bit of studying of Grigory Grabovoi, the Russian creator knowledge, the scientist, fascinating man, of his work. And he has one of his tools or controls is called a cube cone cube, and it's literally a cube surrounded by a cone surrounded by a cube, and you program in that middle cube. So you can have it as small or as big as you want. You visualize it. So I put a cube cone cube when my children are traveling over them, and in the inner one, I program that their experience is in alignment with their highest and best, and I let it go.
Fabulous.
Because, and it's easy to slip back and go, oh, and someone's in your circle's not well, and you go, oh, but no, now's the time
Yeah.
to keep
Yeah.
coming back and keep correcting ourselves and our thinking from going down those familiar pathways. We really are, in my understanding, in unprecedented times. When 3i Atlas came on the
Oh,
scene
yes.
last July, I had messages that I was receiving, and I thought, I wonder where these are coming from. And I believe them to have been from a consciousness that surrounds 3i Atlas.
Yeah.
And the message kept coming through: unprecedented, unprecedented. We can't follow the old ways. We have to find new ways. The old ways got us to where we are now, but for the time ahead, and I think that 0 degrees Aries is very telling of unprecedented.
Yes.
It's like a new beginning.
Yes.
And so we have to follow different paths. We can react to what our ancestors lay down for us, what they left, the heritage they left. But if we want to co-create, we have to co-create from the now. We not react to the now. We see something going on in the world that we don't like. We need to be witnesses. I really believe we can't just go hide in the cupboard and
Oh,
pretend
yeah.
everything's roses and
Yeah.
moonshine.
Yeah.
I feel it's very, very important for us to witness what is going on and choose to consciously create and focus our energy on what we wish to see, not what is actually occurring.
Yes, I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And that's where I think, the point of power, as we know, is in the present. But I also think the point of power at the moment is radiating out from this 0 degree of Aries, where even though neither Saturn or Neptune are exact on that point anymore, their signature is there.
That's
And
right.
it's that resonance. So it's radiating out. And I do think it's fascinating to observe what is happening on the planet, because it is almost as if the dinosaurs, as Steve Judd calls them, are going through their death throes. It's as if we have to go through what is happening, for instance, in the Middle East. It's part of this process. And it was we talk about things like spoiling for a fight, and it's been on the cards for so long. And whether it's the correct or the incorrect thing to have done, we can't really have any control over in that sense. But what we can have intent about is how it resolves.
We can, each and every one of us that decides to actually step up into our own authority. We can spend moments in meditation. We can actually visualize a harmony outcome. We
Yeah.
can visualize.
Yeah.
And the more of us will reach the 100th monkey
Yes.
percentage, and it will just shift just like that.
Yes. And I think, I've heard, and I can't remember who I've heard say this, it could be Pam Gregory, I'm not sure. But I think
She's a brilliant woman, by the way.
sorry?
Brilliant woman,
Yes,
very
she's amazing.
absolutely
She's
amazing.
amazing. I think she was saying, which I absolutely agree with, that it doesn't actually matter, because a lot of people get freaked out and think, but I don't feel any of this. I don't feel I'm waking up or whatever. It doesn't matter. It,
No.
it's different for every single person on the planet. And we have to explore it in our own time, in what is resonating with our own particular timeline of what we are a part of in bringing in to the collective. And we can't always see the bigger picture. We can get a sense of it, but we can't always see it. And I think there's not us and them or them and us. It's just that there is we've got 100 humans, you could say, who are collectively thinking, the potato tastes a lot better without all that dirt and muck on it. So, we've got that. And then eventually everybody will, but they might not see it in the same way, because some might say, actually, I quite liked a bit of sand on the outside, gave it a bit of a crunch, so helped clean my teeth or whatever. But I think that there's also something else because you were bringing in about Three Eye Atlas. And I think it's fascinating that because there was a sort of what I would call a primitive wish for it to be something dramatic. And actually, what has happened, it has done exactly what was predicted by astrophysicists like Stefan Burns, that it would be perihelion with the sun. It would be at a point where it was closest to Earth. And now it's carrying on through our solar system towards Jupiter. And it's done exactly what was mathematically predicted of it. Now, I think the symbolism of Three Eye Atlas coming at this time is enormous. But there may have been many Three Eye Atlases. It's just we've only now recently got the instruments to see them.
That's
So,
right.
so there's something here about the symbolism of look what can emerge, look what can come out from behind the shadow of this eclipse. How is this eclipse going to unfold? What is it actually kind of heralding? Because full moons, as we know, bring about endings, conclusions, resolutions. But I also think, as with a new moon, there's endings and new beginnings in both, because we have to let something go for the new to come in. And this particular full moon is supported in a very constructive way by Jupiter in Cancer, where Three Eye Atlas is heading towards. And Jupiter is trining the sun and sextiling the moon, which are both very helpful aspects. And so there is something here also, the mutability of the Pisces Virgo axis, which is saying, don't worry too much about what is being acted out on the planet, on the stage of the planet, because we can't see all the facets and sides of what's going on. And there will be a bigger picture that we're not aware of. And then this brings me back to Florence Scovel-Shinn, which is about having faith in the dark, having faith in the unseen. And, I learned so much from reading her books, because it really taught me to give it over, that when there is something that feels too overwhelming, you give it to what your word is for the divine, for God. And I think that's an important point to get across, is that the vibration of the word has to resonate with you on every single level, so that if God doesn't do it for you because you have bad experiences as a child of having God banged into you, then find the word that does mean the all of the all, the divine intelligence, or whatever. So, that's where I come from. So, yeah, please.
Are you going to tell us, because I actually happen to know this, are you going to tell us the word that you usually use instead
Yeah,
of God?
I will. It's Florence. which I think
Yes.
is interesting. And that was way before I met you. But it's because the word Florence for me encapsulates all the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn, because they resonated with me on such a deep level, because it feels through her generosity, she told us what the secret is. A lot of people since then have cashed in on what her teachings were to try and ride on her back, to make money out of what she discovered was the truth, what the secret really is. And it shouldn't be a secret. I actually feel quite angry about the book, The Secret, because it actually keeps it a secret.
Well, the magic, come back to abracadabra,
Yeah,
as I speak, so I create. That is very clearly, and then you can come back to the biblical quote,
yeah,
um, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word created.
with God.
So
Or in
that is, it
yeah,
was God.
I say
And
Florence.
yes, and so that is, everything is hidden but not really. And so it's people make things a lot more complicated and a lot more intriguing and a lot more drama.
Oh, yes.
But you bring it back. If we all lived by as I speak, so I create, if we just lived by that, how different would our world be?
I think that's a beautiful place to pause, because it is a
Right.
truth. It's an
It
absolute
is the
truth.
truth.
And
And we can each do that. We don't have to be awake or anything. We can each in our daily life take heed. And that's what Florence Scovel Shinn, in her bit of a tongue twister
it
there,
is a bit, isn't it? Mary Flo Free.
yeah, in her books.
Mm,
I was fascinated when I read her books.
mm,
And there's a bookshop, I think it might have closed in Melbourne, but it's called the Theosophical Bookshop.
mm.
And even all the time since her books have been out, one of the ladies in there said to me, you know, the bestseller of all time and the consistent bestseller are her books.
Right.
So,
How
and
wonderful.
it's actually much more simplistic than we try to make it out.
And yeah, and I'll just add to that, because I actually say when I came across her, it changed my life, because I realized I didn't have to do anything. I just had to give it over. And so that's why I use the word Florence, because it encapsulates her teachings. And I just go with any problem, like with my, all the complicated stuff to do with moving from this country, Gozo, back to the UK. I just go, it's not my problem. I give it to Florence. And
Yes,
everybody's kind of like, how can you be so super cool about all of this? And I say, it's easy, because it's not my problem. I've done my bit, and everything will be as it's meant to be. And I can't possibly know what that is, but I know Florence will do what is the best.
a very, very dear friend of mine. We've come to the conclusion many moons ago that we have journeyed for many lifetimes together. And she always says to me that we've loved each other since before the dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Oh,
And she's a Tai Chi master, has her own Tai Chi school, a beautiful, beautiful friend. But she always says, all I have to do, she said, Jesus is the
right.
one. Your Florence, her
Yeah.
Jesus. She said, Jesus looks after me. She said, all I have to do is I book the hall, I put out the information, and I turn up.
Yeah.
And that's all I have to do.
Yeah.
And so tonight, when I was thinking about, oh, can I even operate Zoom? Do I know
Yeah.
how? Has my
Yeah.
son taught me all these things? I thought, no, I remember Patricia's words. All I have to do is have my laptop plugged in, I can get Zoom up and the rest will take care of itself.
As it has, in spite of it being a Mercury retrograde.
That's right. We've done well.
We have Mary Flo Free. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation about the co-creation of astrology. And I have no doubt we will talk again.
Thank you, Penny. And I hope that the listeners to this are inspired to know that we can by each doing something, we are shifting the reality.
Yes.
So I want it's nobody can hide in the dark and say, I can't do anything to change this. We each have it within our power by consciously using our word, and each day spend a few minutes visualizing what you wish to see. You don't,
Yes.
what we wish to
Yes.
create.
But it's also about saying what is for my highest good.
Yes, it's always
Mm.
our highest and best.
Mm.
Um, you know, we might have an experience that we don't particularly like. I had quite a few of those in the last year, but ultimately, I know that the end outcome is for my highest and best.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where, yeah, that's
Mary,
how I get through different difficult
fine.
situations. I
Mary,
look at the learning.
thank you so much for being here today. And
Thanks
thank
to
you,
you.
and thank you, everybody who has come here to watch. And just to let you know that the next In Conversation With is going to be Alex Trenoweth. And we are going to be looking at how to make Saturn your friend. And that'll be probably sometime during next week, which is the week starting the 9th. So that's coming. And what else did I want to say? Well, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And what can I say? Except thank you for being here with us. And we look forward to seeing you again another time because I'm going to have this lady back. Okay. Take care, everybody. Lots of love and bye for now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.